Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. Head over to believe.com. That's BLEAV.com to support our show as well as others. My name is Tyler, and I am back after nearly a month-long hiatus from the show. What happened was my wife and I had a baby girl. And as anybody who has kids or has been around kids or, has kids in their life likely understands, it's a big game changer. It's not our first kid. We have other kids, but anytime you make an addition to the family, huge change in your lifestyle forever, but especially the first couple weeks, it's just insanity. You're not sleeping, you're kind of eating, you're kind of showering. But all that said is Eli and Jesse stepped in for me, understanding that it was going to be a big change for me for a while and have taken on all of the workload this last month, a ton of extra episodes. And I really cannot express how much I appreciate that to them. So I wanted to say that off the top here. But from here on through the end of the season and end of the off season, I will be back for every third episode like we normally do. But yeah, just shout out to those two guys for really stepping in and doing an awesome job these last couple weeks. But all right, let's get into the Baltimore Orioles and baseball and all those things. I will admit, have not been as in tune with the birds the last couple weeks, having a baby as I would be normally, but I do know they're not playing as great recently as we had hoped coming to this point in the season, which is late July. And late July is that annual part of the year where you can make or break your postseason dreams. And coming into the season, we all hoped the Orioles were going to be really good. We understood they had some flaws, but they could maybe limp through, be around 500 by the deadline, maybe a little bit above, and be in a position to get Kyle Bradish back, get Grayson Rodriguez back, and make these final tweaks at the end of July to push them towards a postseason berth and hopefully a deep postseason run, something they have not done in the Michael Elias era. They haven't done it all since 2014 when they won the AL East and then got all the way to the ALCS before losing to the Royals. But unfortunately, it's just not going to happen that way. The Orioles are too far out of it, and they're not going to be able to turn it around in time to make it make sense for them to be buying at the deadline. We had a little bit of a taste of this a couple weeks ago when the Orioles traded Brian Baker to the Tampa Bay Rays for the 37th overall pick in the draft that was just about a week ago. They took Slater DeBrune with that pick. Haven't signed him yet as of this recording, but as happens most of the time, the top 10 round picks typically get signed. But Elias said at that point that was kind of a step in the selling direction, but left the door open for the Orioles to, change his mind on that, to win some games, to go on a run, maybe get closer to 500, get to 500 by the end of July. That was still possible. And maybe that would make him do things a little bit differently. I don't think Elias was ever going to totally sell the farm for this team, but I think he would have stood pat, held on to some guys, maybe make some minor trades, add a reliever, add a back end rotation piece, see if we can sneak in the playoffs with 85, 86, 87 wins. But the math just isn't mathing at this point, and it doesn't make sense for the Orioles to continue down that road. And some further evidence of this is Mike Elias spoke on MLB Network Radio earlier in the week, actually this past weekend, gave some quotes to the host there. Specifically, this is what MLB Trade Rumors called out. Elias said, when we're at this point in the standings and 11 days away from the trade deadline, we've got to be realistic about our situation. The conversations I'm having right now are more oriented towards what's out there for some of our available major league players. We're not blowing up the team. We think we're going to be very good again in 2026 and have that intention. We're not interested in changing the foundation of the team, but to the degree that we have players that interest other clubs who are coming towards the end of their contracts, we've got to listen to that. That's what we're spending our time on now. And that's a very Mike Elias quote of like saying it but not saying it, which he's not saying we're selling, but he's basically saying we're getting ready to sell. And look, that makes perfect sense. We can fault Mike Elias for a lot of things, the way this team was structured, the flaws that were built in, maybe not being honest with themselves about some of the injury stuff they had with, you knew Bradish wasn't going to be back till late. You knew Grayson Rodriguez had some injury stuff already prior to this season. Maybe it shouldn't have been a wise decision to go into the year with him as your like number two. And on top of that, the signings they made were, I think, logical back end additions of Sugano and Morton, but probably shouldn't have come into the year thinking they were going to be, front half of the staff arms like they've had to be for most of the season. We've seen that not really work out. And at the same time, the Tyler O'Neill signing has been a total failure so far. He's going to be in Baltimore for 2 more years after this because there's no way he's opting out after this terrible season he's had. So a lot of things that Elias didn't do great coming into the season, but I think where we're at now, he's not going to double down on a terrible decision. He has made a concerted effort. He's going to make a concerted effort now to improve the minor league ranks of this team moving forward. He took a step with that with the Baker deal, added a first round pick that maybe Slater DeBrune never makes it to the majors. Maybe he never makes it with the Orioles, but at the very least, he added another like pretty good talent to the organization that maybe he makes it to Baltimore one day. Maybe he becomes a trade piece that during this window can bring a valuable major league quality player to the Orioles. Him along with the entire draft class, because the Orioles had the biggest signing bonus pool of all time, added a bunch of high quality players that we haven't exactly seen all the outlets kind of place them into their top 10, top 30, whatever you like. But I think you've added probably three or four guys to your top 10, probably 10 guys to your top 30. And then you're going to trade some pieces this week or this month to add a couple more guys to sort of that mid tier. I don't think any of the players they have available right now are going to get you a top 10 prospect or anything like that, but I think you're going to add some depth, some insurance to your minor league system. And I think what I'd like to do with this episode is kind of dig into the Orioles roster, dig into this Mike Elias quote, and kind of combine the two to determine who's on the market, who's not. What are the Orioles on July 22nd as I record this? How are they going to look different on August 1st once the trade deadline dust is settled and go on from there. So let's go into that. I wrote about it on Camden Chat this week. So if you read about it there, this isn't going to be brand new information, but I think maybe I'll add some context to it, some additional words that I couldn't in the written piece. So we've got a couple categories here. One is the untouchables. Two is would need to be blown away by an offer. Three is no reason to move right now. Four is moving on out. And five is could go either way. So let's start with the untouchables because I think it's a pretty straightforward list. There's one name in here that's a little bit odd, odd compared to the others. We'll talk about it. But the untouchables are Gunnar Henderson, Jackson Holliday, Jordan Westburg, Colton Cowser, Adley Rutschman, and Kobe Mayo. I think Henderson, Holliday, Westburg, Cowser, pretty self-explanatory there. Those are guys that are in the lineup every single day. Cowser is potentially your center fielder next year. Westbrook, Holliday, Henderson, that's your third second baseman and shortstop next year. No questions asked. Adley Rutschman's gotten a tough rap, I think, this last year because he just really struggled in the second half last year. Started off well in the first half this year, then struggled and then got better and then got hurt. But look, Adley Rutschman, even when he's not at his best, even when he's like pretty good, is a top 10 catcher, top 5 catcher. We saw that at moments this year. Yes, the defense isn't great. It's not where we've wanted it to be, but the offense is so much better than what most other catchers can offer you. And while Semi Basayo is fun and interesting and coming soon, there's enough questions about his bat that I don't think the Orioles can say, oh yeah, when Basayo gets up here, like we're ready for him to be the everyday catcher, and that makes Rutschman expendable. I just don't think that's how it works. And I think, it's interesting to look at this with the draft the Orioles just had too, where they took Ike Irish and Caden Bodine, two catchers. Irish maybe is an outfielder, but two catchers at least for now. In addition to having, your top prospect is Basayo, your top prospect not so long ago was Rutschman. The Orioles keep, bringing in these top level prospect catchers, and people are like, well, are they trying to move on from Rutschman? It's like, well, no, not really. It's just this is the reality of it. We've seen the injury situation with the catchers this year, and when you have a catcher that can hit at or above league average, that buys you so much wiggle room on the rest of the roster that you can have a glove first guy somewhere else. And because your catcher is lifting the load of like what you might expect from your left fielder or something like that, you can now have a little more finesse with your roster. So Rutschman, although he's, gotten a tough rap, I think this last year, still so valuable. And again, he's under team control for 2 more seasons after this in 26 and 27. So there's no reason for the Orioles to move him. He's so valuable. I view him as untouchable right now. Kobe Mayo is the other one's a little interesting because he hasn't played well so far. He also hasn't really gotten a chance. And I don't think it makes a lot of sense right now for the Orioles to move him for really anything. I know I've got another category that says doesn't make sense, but Mayo's in this untouchable category because he has a ton of talent. Prospect watchers acknowledge that. The Orioles acknowledge that. I think they've navigated the season with the intention of him becoming an heir apparent somewhere on the diamond. It seems like first base, where they've said, all right, you've done all you can do in AAA. You've crushed the pitching the last 2 seasons. It's time for you to be in the majors. And maybe we don't want you starting right now, but we see our seasons going down the tubes, and we think it'd be valuable for you to sit here and watch and learn some things. And then you can step in August 1st when Ryan O'Hearn's likely gone. Ryan Mountcastle is probably back and from his injury, but we view him as maybe expendable this offseason. So we're going to give you some more of the playing time, Kobe. I think that's an untouchable asset. Yes, you could offer them a ton for him, but I don't know what the Orioles think of him right now. He's theoretically super valuable, so I'm not sure I can even quantify him right now. So from my perspective, he is untouchable. Now for the would need to be blown away by an offer. I've got Trevor Rogers, Felix Bautista, Dean Kramer, and Kyle Bradish. Rogers and Bautista have been rumored to be talked about in trade discussions with the Orioles so far. But it also has been said that the Orioles are not, too enthused about moving them. They would need to be blown away by an offer. Rogers is signed through next year or is under team control through next year, and Batista, I think, has maybe 3 years after this. Rogers, a project that you got from the Marlins last year, did not go well until about May, June of this year. Now he looks fantastic and locked in. And I think for a team that desperately needs starting pitching going into next year, you can't take a guy that you have theoretically fixed and sell him off. And I think also, if he is fixed, if he's a 2 ERA guy, I mean, he's probably not a 2 ERA guy, but if he's a 3 ERA guy next year for 170 innings, he's a qualifying offer guy. And the qualifying offer guy, you're getting basically a first round pick back for. Now, this could all be upended when the CBA changes, so that's definitely some mathematics they need to do. But in the world that we exist in right now, Trevor Rogers is could be a QO guy next year. So you're not going to trade him now for, yes, he has a year of team control, but what are other teams valuing him at? Is he a 4 ERA guy? Is he a 3 ERA guy? Those vary quite drastically. And I think for an Orioles team that is hoping to compete again next year and needs to build a rotation, Rogers isn't a guy you're going to get rid of. Similar to Felix Bautista, he's come back from the Tommy John. I think looked really good. He's certainly not like as locked down as he was in 2023, but still really, really good, has his moments, and I think he's going to come back even stronger in 2026. Again, if they give you some crazy offer, I think you have to consider it because relief pitchers are so volatile, and we've seen him get hurt once already, and he's a little bit older. He's not 25, he's 30 or 31. But even still, if you're competing in 2026 rather, you need the back end of your bullpen to not be a problem. The Orioles have had some bullpen stuff this year where you don't feel great about the middle innings. You're going to lose a ton of your guys from your bullpen this year, regardless of if you trade them or not. A lot of them are free agents. You don't have a ton of wiggle room. I think the Orioles probably want to get more flexible in the bullpen next year with some more option type guys. But Bautista, you need your ninth inning to be solved. And I don't think trading him is a good start to your 2026 season. So I would hold on to him as well. Kramer and Bradish kind of go to the same points as Rogers in terms of building out a rotation. I think the Orioles still need to go out and get like that ace type of pitcher this offseason. But in Kramer, you have a bona fide back end rotation guy that you can count on. And yes, he had some wobbles early in the year, but he's been fantastic the last 2 months. And you can just count on him as your 4 and number 5 and feel pretty good about the 60, 170 innings he's going to give you as a 4.5 ERA guy. Those guys are expensive. You got to pay $15 million for those kinds of guys, whereas Kramer's already baked into the roster as that guy. So I would hold on to him. And then Bradish, coming back from an injury, really, obviously a really talented pitcher, but has years of control. I think you can now ease him into 2026, give him, make him a 5 and dive type pitcher for the rest of this year, allow him to build back up in the offseason. And then 2026, you feel good about Kyle Bradish being your number 2, number 1, maybe. But definitely your number 2 going into next year. Moving on to the no reason to move right now. It's a very interesting combination of players here. I've got Yennier Cano, Cade Povich, Grayson Rodriguez, Ryan Mountcastle, Albert Suarez, and Tyler Wells. Now, there's a lot of injuries here. Really, the only one that hasn't been injured this year is Cano. He's just been inconsistent, but I think we've seen him be so good at times. Obviously, made an all-star team. Again, the bullpen, you need to have some solutions there, and Cano is an experienced arm that if you go sign a guy like him, you're going to probably spend, $5 to $10 million on that kind of a guy. I'd rather just keep the guy in house, a guy I know who is your ground ball machine. So I'd keep Cano for that reason. Povich, he's a flexible arm, can be demoted, can be optioned rather. I think he's a guy that I've seen a lot of good things out of. He's not super consistent, but he's a young guy. You need these types of players in your organization to yo-yo back and forth. Rodriguez been hurt, question marks. He's likely not pitching this year. He could be not pitching next year. So really there's probably no team interested in him at this moment, but I think there's still that upside there that you'd be selling him now at the very bottom of his value. That makes no sense. You might as well just hold on to him, pay him his arbitration. I think maybe he's got one more year before arbitration. I can't remember, but even if he's not coming back until late 2026 or early 2027, again, arms aren't cheap of the quality of Rodriguez. And yeah, maybe he is damaged goods and never going to be the guy you want him to be. But even if he's a back end arm, still there's value in that. You just hold on to the guy and hope he can rehab okay. Mountcastle, I think he's an offseason trade candidate. He's got some good things about him. Good glove, good personality. Um, his bat comes and goes. I think the Orioles would love for Kobe Mayo to take first base for his own, and then that makes Ryan Mountcastle very expendable. But I think right now it doesn't make a lot of sense to move him. I think you'd like him to come back and maybe, mentor Mayo a little bit in terms of acclimating to the major leagues a little bit more. But feels like an offseason move to me if Mayo does take over first base, and then you feel like, okay, I've got Mayo, Holiday, Henderson, Westberg. My infield is solved. Cows are in the outfield. I kind of just need to find like one more bat and one more pitcher and then fill out the bullpen. And that's a lot to do, but it's doable in the offseason. So Mountcastle, hold on to him now. And he could be one of the guys that helps you fill out that bullpen because I've always felt Mountcastle's the guy you move to a team that has maybe too many bullpen pieces but needs some right-handed pop. You get a movable arm, maybe an optionable arm for Mountcastle, and he could go start somewhere. Suarez, really just here because he's a flexible arm that you can keep around that can start, and he's been injured all year, so there's really no reason to move him. I think you're selling him at a low point when again you need to fill out that bullpen. Same for Tyler Wells. Again, with these injured guys, injured players can be traded. Teams aren't usually too interested in getting those guys unless they're really confident in their medicals, and doing that midseason as part of a playoff push doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think like from both an opposing team and the Orioles perspective, doesn't make sense to move these, pitchers that are coming back from, especially from arm injuries. I think if a pitcher's coming back from like a hamstring or something, you feel differently about it. But when it's a shoulder, when it's an elbow, I think from both sides, it doesn't make a lot of sense to make those changes. Now, the bulk of the Orioles changes, I think, are going to come from this moving on out category. And this is the category that basically Elias said we're going to sell from. It's players that are getting close to the end of their contracts. And that would be Sir Anthony Dominguez, Gregory Soto, Charlie Morton, Ryan O'Hearn, and Cedric Mullins. I think Dominguez and Soto are definitely going. These are relievers that make pretty decent salaries, throw really hard, have really big moments at times, but it makes no sense to hold on to them. You're not giving them a qualifying offer. You can bring up young players to pitch this year to gain some experience, to maybe teach you what you've got internally for 2026, and you can get back some, mid-tier type of prospect. You're not going to get crazy value for Dominguez and Soto, but you'll get something back, and that's better than letting them walk in the offseason for nothing when, they're not really eating innings. They're high leverage guys. They're definitely going to go. Morton, I believe, is going to go as well. Was really rough in his first start out of the All-Star break, but had been really, really good since, pretty much mid-May. And he's got so much value because he's relieved in the postseason. He's won playoff games. He's won the World Series before. I think he'll go as well. And I think he could be sneaky expensive for what he is. Like obviously he doesn't have years of control. He doesn't have a ton of upside, but in terms of rental starting pitchers who are really more back end arms, but I could see him sneaking in and making a start in the playoffs if needed. Morton, I think, is going to go for more than maybe what we would expect him to, especially if you could look at his April numbers when they were just atrocious. But again, I think he'll get one more start before the deadline. If he's really, really bad in that start, maybe that upends things. But if he returns and that start out of the break is more of a blip, then I think he'll be totally fine and go for a pretty good cost. Ryan O'Hearn is the one that should be the most expensive for a team to acquire. Left-handed hitter, can play first base. His defense has improved a lot this year at first base. Can also play the corner outfield spots if you need him to. So there is some positional flexibility there that I think a team will appreciate. He's not just a first base DH type. Yeah, the defense in the outfield's not great, but he can do it, and he's certainly not the worst in the league at it. And the bat's been good all year. He's not like a 40 homer type of guy, but he's a good professional hitter that makes you throw strikes, doesn't chase a lot. I think a team could really, really get a lot of value out of him. So I expect O'Hearn to cost the most. And I think O'Hearn's the one you could potentially get like a back end top 100 type of player if there is a bidding for him. As far as who the Orioles target with that, what type of player, I'll leave that up to Elias. They need pitching, but you can't always trade for need that way. You need to go for like the best value. So, maybe he ends up getting an outfielder or something like that. But O'Hearn is the one that I think you could get a back end top 100 type of player for him, or you can get two, lesser type of players. Mullins is one that I'm a little interested to see. I think he does go because again, it doesn't make a lot of sense for the Orioles to hold him. I don't view him as a qualifying offer candidate because if he is, then the Orioles would have to pay him $20 million next year to come back, and I don't think the Orioles want to do that. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to hold on to him. You can have Mullins or you can have Cowser step in and play center field for him, and you've got plenty of other options. Laureano can play center field if you hold on to him. But I'm not sure what Mullins' value is. The bat hasn't been great this year. He was really good early in the year, but has really faded. Doesn't really hit lefties anymore. He's still really fast, still has really good range in the outfield, but his defensive metrics are getting really bad because his arm is just that terrible. I still think a team, ultimately you want your center fielder to catch the ball, and Mullins still does a really good job at that. But there are deficiencies in not having an arm. So I'm not sure what his value is going to be. I think it could be much less than what maybe we hoped, a couple months ago. If you said, "Hey, we're selling Mullins," could bring you a pretty penny, a Gold Glove caliber center fielder who could lead off in a pinch, is a competent, about league average hitter. Like that's a valuable piece, but he's dipped below average in the box. And while the speed and range are good, the arm does hold him back. So I think Mullins will go because again, it doesn't make sense for the Orioles to hold on to him, but there might not be a ton of returning value in that one. And then moving on to the could go either way. This is the most interesting group, I think, naturally, because these are players that the Orioles could hold on to. They could trade. These are guys that some of them, don't have a role on this team moving forward. Some of them are injured. Some of them could have a role on the team moving forward. So let's get into that. The first two, Zach Eflin and Tomoyuki Sagano. Eflin feels like a natural trade candidate, but has been hurt and has not been bad. And Eflin is one that I think he could be a qualifying offer candidate because the league knows him. He's been competent for quite a long time. If he comes back and looks decent in August and September, I could see the Orioles saying, "Hey, like we need another arm anyway. Like let's say we have Bradish, we have Kramer, we have who else we got in the rotation for next year? Trevor Rogers, that's three. Povich is around, Suarez is around, Wells is around. Like we have the depth now. Eflin can be another one of those guys. Now, do you love paying him 20 some $million? No, but he's a guy and you've got him that if he does accept the qualifying offer, okay, he's going to be motivated. He wants to show the league he's healthy. He doesn't, he wants to go into free agency next year with no doubt he's going to get a 3-year deal for 90 million or something like that. Let's give him the $20 million this year and see how things go. So I think Eflin, that's why it could go either way. If the Orioles aren't getting much of an offer for him, let's just hold on to him and maybe we retain him for next year. Sagano is similar in that, I don't know that the value is really there for him at this point. He's not pitching great. He hasn't pitched great for over a month at this point. I don't know that a competing team wants a rookie 35-year-old who's starting to show some issues maybe with the league adjusting to him. So from a buying team's perspective, I'm not sure that's a guy I want on the roster. And from a selling perspective, the Orioles also have to think about surviving the rest of the season, which is we need guys to pitch innings. And we'd rather Sagano go out there and take his lumps versus, forcing Bradish to go another inning versus putting Povich out there before he's fully healthy. Same thing with Wells, same thing with Suarez. Like these are guys that we maybe care about for 2026. And not to say you don't care about Sagano and his well-being, but you'd be more comfortable pushing him than stretching some of your younger guys or guys that you need to be up to snuff in 2026. So if you're not getting offers and you need to find innings anyway, Sagano has value to the organization in just sticking around and then also proving to the league, like, hey, I can pitch in the league. Like I still have something to prove. I want to be back in 2026 with some roster, maybe not with the Orioles, but somewhere in the league. And if he shows off, then that does it for him. I think he's still not a qualifying offer option. He'd be more of I need a warm body to pitch some innings, and Sagano would be motivated to pitch better in the last, 2 months. Then there's Ramon Urias and Ramon Laureano, two guys that can be on the Orioles next year. Urias has got his last year of team control. His final year of arbitration is next year, and Laureano has a team option for next year. Urias, the man does his job. He gets a lot of guff for not being, extraordinary in really any sense of any one part of the game. Obviously, he has a Gold Glove and does a nice job in the field, but doesn't wow you in the batter's box. But he just like is so consistent and so dependable in every way, shape, and form that I think there's value to that guy being on your roster if you're planning to contend in 2026. But he's going to get a raise in arbitration. You have to weigh that against the value of it. And at the same time, I could see, like I said, a contender has value in Urias's skill set that could make him valuable on the trade market. Now, how valuable? I don't know. Like, is he viewed as a starter, everyday starter at third base or second base or anywhere for a contender? I'm not so sure. Like maybe the Yankees would take him. Like that's an interdivision thing. You don't want to, strengthen your rivals too much, but the Yankees aren't known for overpaying at the deadline. They want to get Suarez from the Diamondbacks, who obviously is a better hitter than Urias, but Urias probably a better fielder, more dependable, more flexible in his positioning. Like there could be something there, but teams need these bench pieces that can give you flexibility to your roster, and Urias certainly does that. But same can be said for the Orioles going into 2026. Laureano has been such a stud for the Orioles this year. Out of nowhere, kind of been their best hitter. Not what they expected, getting tons of value out of that contract. I'm sure, himself maybe regretting signing that contract now. Would love to be a free agent after this year and go, get his bag this offseason, but I'm sure he's doing all right financially. But the Orioles outfield is a little bit questionable next year. It's, if Mullins is gone, it's Cowser in center, it's O'Neill somewhere, maybe Heston Kjerstad's backup. Maybe they go get a hitter. I think if the Orioles do add a hitter this offseason, it will be an outfielder. But they could bring Ramon Laureano back for like not too much of a cost. You feel good about him playing both corners and center field in a pinch. Like there's a lot of value there where, if you get a crazy good trade offer, okay. But the Orioles have to think about 2026 too. And if you keep Laureano, you know what you have. You don't have to go back into the market and you know what his potential is. Like maybe you caught lightning in a bottle and you need to move him now and he could fall off a cliff again next year. But at the same time, it makes your offseason a little bit easier to keep him. It does tighten your budget a little bit more, but maybe you make up with that by trading away a Mountcastle, a Urias, these guys going into their final year of arbitration, and you can find replacements for them that are, a fraction of the cost. Andrew Kittredge, reliever, has an option for next year. Relievers are always valuable in the trade market, although they don't make a big return. But he's not flexible for the bullpen next year, and he's going to cost I think $10 million, which isn't cheap for a reliever that was hurt this year. Okay, not amazing. But you could see a team having value in that for the playoff push this year. But I don't expect the team would want him back for what his option is. So, and the Orioles could be in the same situation. So if you're not going to pick up that option, I think you trade him now and try to get whatever you can for it, and let the team that takes him make that decision on the buyout or the picking up of the option. I have Jorge Mateo on here because he is a free agent at year's end and has a skill set in stealing bases and playing good defense that is valuable to a playoff push, just to put on your bench and say like, hey, you're never really going to hit. Maybe you'll face a lefty here and there, but you're just going to run the bases and field. Now, the issue with him is he's hurt right now in a hamstring injury, and he's not expected back until September. Again, you can trade for injured players, but it's about if you want to take on that risk or not. So, really, the Orioles would have to be kind of giving Mateo away, which, maybe it's worth it to them to unload the last little bit of his salary. You're not going to really play much for us anyway. Let's trade you, and some team can get you just in time for, the end of the season. You can have a week or two at the end of September to get right, and then you can pinch run for them in the playoffs. I don't think that's a terrible idea if you're a contender. It's just, are you willing to give up even a bag of balls for a guy that may not play for you at all? He could be hurt enough that he doesn't play for you. That's where the medical review comes in, but I think that could happen. And then Keegan Aiken, again, has been a good pitcher for the Orioles, but he's a reliever, and I think relievers are all kind of on the trading block this time of year. If you're if you only have a year or two of team control left, I think like, yeah, let's see if we can get anything for you, because while you've been good this year, maybe you won't be good next year. I think the Orioles could take that approach as well. And he's hurt right now too, but I think he's expected back maybe late July, early August at this point, so it doesn't sound like it's too extreme. But I think that it could make sense for a team to go and get him because he does have an additional year of team control beyond this. And I think he can be optioned still, if I'm remembering. But even if not, you're getting him in August. You're probably not thinking about optioning him anyway. You're thinking about adding a lefty to your bullpen. And look, Aiken, for all his faults, didn't work out as a starter, but he can strike some guys out. And he has streaks he goes on where he's really, really impressive out of the bullpen and coming from the left side. And a guy that, can give you a spot start, can give you multiple innings if need be. There's a lot of value in that. And that pretty much covers it. I didn't go over every single player on the roster. I didn't include all the fringy relievers. I think like, if you're a guy coming up and down, there's not a lot of value to you on the trade market, but there's value to the Orioles in terms of keeping you around as a guy that can be optioned and give you flexibility in the bullpen. So that didn't feel like worth talking about. And then the backup catchers, Gary Sanchez is hurt for a while. Um, yeah, Alex Jackson, Jacob Stallings. These aren't guys that I think have much value to a team outside of the Orioles. So I didn't feel like there was much to talk about there. They could get traded, but they were all available, not so long ago for cheap. So if somebody wanted them, they would have gotten them instead of the Orioles. So I don't think that's, makes a lot of sense to get too worked up about. But that's how I've got it for now. I think, my basic expectation for the trade deadline is that the Orioles will be sellers, obviously. I think they will sell a handful of players. They probably won't end up selling somebody that we're surprised. They'll hang on to somebody like Morton, or they'll hang on to Mullins or something because they maybe just don't see the value in some of the offers they get. But in general, I feel pretty good about them selling those guys I put into the moving on out bucket. They might end up selling somebody we don't really expect right now. I feel like most people aren't talking about Ramon Urias getting dealt or a Jorge Mateo. Like these are smaller moves that I think a playoff team could see some value in padding their bench a little bit for, relatively low cost. There's no reason for the Orioles to give away Urias necessarily, but Mateo, it's like, look, just take the salary and we'll take some 17-year-old who you don't really care about off your hands and call it a day, or a player to be named later and ends up being like a 25-year-old that's been at AAA for 3 years. Like, okay, it's organizational filler, but we're not paying Jorge Mateo for the last 2 months while he rehabs and then, pinch runs for you or something like that. So I feel like that's kind of what I'm in for is the guys on expiring deals, they'll probably go. You'll see one or two names that are, not expecting to go, will go. And then the overall return the Orioles are going to get is probably not going to be crazy impressive, but that's about what you expect at this point. They're not trading the Hendersons, the Rutschmans, the Westbergs, the Kausers. They're not trading these guys that are, franchise cornerstones. They are trading, the peripheral of their roster. They're trading guys with not a lot of time left on their deals. And when you do that, you just can't expect to get a lot back unless there is a run on that type of player. There's just not a lot available in a need there. And the rules of supply and demand apply here. And while Dominguez and Soto are really interesting relievers, there's also a ton of relievers on the market, so you're not going to get a ton of value there. Whereas there's not as many, left-handed hitting players that are batting, 280, 290, 30% above league average. So I think you could see O'Hearn go for maybe a fringy top 100 type of player that, could help the Orioles out. Um, but yeah, it's going to be a busy deadline, but maybe not the most exciting and franchise altering one for the Orioles. And I think that's okay. That sort of feels like where the Orioles should be, at the end of 2025, going into 2026. They need to position themselves to be really good next year. And that means adding some young players now that they can then probably flip for trades that are to their advantage at the major league level, either going into 2026 or in the middle of 2026. And that's what I'm focused on right now. So bummer the year hasn't worked out. We've got 2 months here, August and September, to learn a little bit about the 2026 team. I think especially Mayo, Holiday, you want to see improvement there. You want to see Bradish come back, Wells come back and look good on the mound. Hopefully we get some good news on Rodriguez, although we'll see about that. But yeah, it's an exciting time of year because trades are really fun and interesting to talk about, but it's just unfortunate the Orioles are on the wrong side of it this year. And let's hope that that's the last time they have to be on this side of it for a couple of years after this. But that's all I got for this episode. I really appreciate you guys listening. Again, thanks to Jesse and Eli for taking care of things the last month or so. I'm back up and running here moving forward. If you like what you heard here, please subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. You can also follow the show on Blue Sky at The Warehouse Pod, so check us out there. And you can also head to Believe.com, that's BLEAV.com, to check out our podcast as well as other Orioles podcasts. The Verge is on Believe, so go check us out there. And also on YouTube, you can go see the video version of this podcast over on YouTube. You can see my face up in the corner as I flip through the websites that I'm looking at for this episode. So go check us out there. But yeah, that is the end of this episode. I think, I don't know, Eli or Jesse will be back on here in a couple of days to talk about some, even more trade deadline news, I'm sure, because that's just the flavor of the week that we've got for you. But thanks so much. My name is Tyler, and this has been the Warehouse Podcast, and we'll talk to you next time.